Smokey stood up and swept the room with a brutal stare. Most of the addicts looked away. She was one of them, and they knew there was no story they could tell her, because she had heard them all. 2. The couple in the automobile was still arguing when the man driving parked in front of Porky's house. From outside, the house looked innocent enough, a small two-family flat with the downstairs flat boarded up. There were boards over all the windows in the downstairs apartment, giving it the appearance of having been closed for quite a while. Once there had been a fence around the place, but like many houses on the east side of Detroit, the fence had gone first, then the grass had followed. Now, there were only a few fence posts remaining in random spots around the front of the house. Teddy glanced at the small woman sitting beside him. "Terry, give me those other $2, and I'll get a $10 pack for us." The woman sitting beside him had the looks of a small doll. She was tiny, just under 5 feet, with jet black hair that hung down around her shoulders. Her skin had a golden hue about it, impossible to acquire unless you were fortunate enough to be born with it. Her eyes, when she glanced up at the man with her, were bright and glittered with the joy of life and the happiness of being a woman in love. All of her features were small, and she had a habit of sticking her tongue out between her beautifully curved lips whenever she was deep in thought. Her smile held the promise of sweet sensuality and inward delights for the man lucky enough to receive her attention. At his words, Terry puckered her mouth in a tight frown. "I can't do that, Teddy. I've got to have gas money so I can drive back and forth to work." She crossed her legs, revealing lovely tan thighs. "Besides," she continued, "I already gave you $8 out of the $10 bill I borrowed from Mama, and I was supposed to make it last me the rest of the week." "Oh, baby," Teddy whined. He stuck his lip out like a small child. Terry squinted up her nose. "Shit, Teddy, you don't need all that dope anyway." For a moment, Teddy was too occupied considering the gas gauge to reply. "You got enough gas, Terry, to get to work and back?" he said. "Come on, let's run up to Porky's and get a little blow." Again she frowned. "Damn, Teddy, you know I don't want to go upstairs in that nasty house. The smell makes me sick. Plus that nasty, fat black bastard always tries to look up under my dress." She made a small gesture with her hand, then continued, "Teddy, you know I hate the sight of all those people lying around on that dirty floor, with blood running all down their arms and legs. No thank you, baby. I can think of 1,000 things I'd rather do this day than go up in that funky house. So please, Daddy, don't ask me to go up there with you. I'd rather wait in the car." Teddy didn't even bother to listen to what she had to say. If she didn't go up, he didn't have to give her any of the dope. But then again, if she went with him, he stood a better chance of hitting Porky up for a little credit. He tossed the idea around in his head. He was well aware of the fact that Porky was interested in Terry, but for that matter, Porky was interested in anything with a skirt on, and that didn't just go for women. "Come on," he ordered, making his mind up at once. With Terry along, he just might be able to get enough stuff so that he wouldn't have to go out hustling the rest of the day. It was worth the chance. He didn't have anything to lose by trying. Terry shrugged. She knew that sound in his voice. It was always better to give in when Teddy spoke like that, because if she didn't, she ran the chance of getting slapped down. Or worse, they would end up arguing the rest of the day until she went to work. She climbed out of the small, compact car, grumbling under her breath, and waited until Teddy came around the car. The look she tossed him was full of anger, but there was no hiding the love she held for her man. They were both just about the same size, with the same golden brown complexions. At first sight, many people would take them to be brother and sister. He flashed his brilliant smile at her when he reached the sidewalk. Sometimes it made her happy just to be allowed to run with him. She didn't really care when he didn't take her anywhere. What she wanted was the enjoyment of just being with her man. "You black men in Detroit are something else," Terry said as she grabbed his arm. "If I can only figure out a way to get him away from all this dope," she thought. She remembered the beautiful times they had had together before Teddy started using. She wondered again for the 1000th time, if Teddy had a habit. He claimed he didn't, but she didn't know. For one thing, she didn't know that much about dope to be able to tell if he had one or not. She believed he was becoming strung out, if he wasn't hooked yet. At the rate he was going, it was just a matter of time. If she could figure out some way to stop him from using, things would be just like they used to be. The little amount of heroin she took when she was out with him was nothing. She believed she was too strong to become addicted. Actually, the only reason she took the stuff was that Teddy liked her to turn on at times when he did. But other than that, she really didn't like the stuff. Sometimes it made her sick. She couldn't even hold any food in her stomach. Teddy took her arm and led her up the sidewalk towards the house. She glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. Self-consciously, she noticed again that she was taller than he was whenever she wore her heels. She made a mental note not to wear her heels when he picked her up, unless they were going out somewhere. The thought of going out somewhere made her smile. They hadn't even been to a movie in the last month. She twisted around and stared at him. His thin face, with its keen nose, topped off by his deep, fierce, cold black eyes, was a woman's dream. His eyes gave him the look of a hunting eagle. When they reached the porch steps, she stopped. "I'll follow you," she said, and stood waiting patiently until Teddy went up the stairs first. They entered the frame house and went up the rickety stairway. By the time they reached the top, someone was already watching their approach out of one of the small peepholes that had been cut in the door of Porky's apartment. Terry wrinkled up her nose as the smell from the flat came to her. It was a sickening odor, stale blood, with whatever else happened to be on the floor. She wondered how the people living there could adjust to such an odor. She remembered the first time she had come up these steps with Teddy. The odor had been so strong, she had almost vomited. Before Teddy could knock, they heard someone remove the 2x4 that was kept across the door, and then the door opened slowly. A feeling of nausea began to invade her soul as she entered the apartment. Terry swallowed, fighting down the sickness. For some reason, it was always this way when she entered this flat, or what she sometimes called jokingly, the room of horror. The doorman closed the door behind them and replaced the large 2x4 across the doorway. Terry's sharp, dark eyes darted around like flying sparrows as she scanned the room. It was the same as usual, the only difference being that the people changed. Other than that, they were doing the same things. It's like stepping into another world, she thought, as she stared around at the addicts, nodding and searching for veins to shoot the dope in. The people were strange. Men and women alike scratched whatever part of their body itched, no matter who might be watching. She stared at two white boys, who would have been conspicuous in any other all-black environment. But here, the color problem didn't really exist. A dope fiend was a dope fiend, whether he was black or not. If he had the money and was cool with Porky, he could relax and shoot his dope. Teddy grinned as Porky's voice came booming across the room. It was an artificial grin, one that many junkies have complete control of. Always smile when the pusher speaks. Very seldom can he do anything wrong. "Well, well, well, look who's finally came and visited little me," Porky yelled from the bedroom doorway. They both turned in time to see Porky waddling out of the bedroom towards them. His fat face seemed to be the epitome of happiness as he crossed the living room floor towards them. "Teddy, you naughty boy, you. Why have you been keeping this lovely child away from me?" He stopped and wiped the sweat from his brow. "You know how much I enjoy looking at such a cute young thing as Terry." His eyes swept up and down Terry's well-shaped body, stripping her of her clothes with his piercing, pig-like eyes. She managed to fight down a shiver of horror as she returned his stare. There was no way for her to conceal the fear she had of him. It was in her eyes, and she trembled slightly as she looked away from his hungry stare. To her, he was a monstrosity, fatter than any human being had a right to be. In truth, he was a good specimen of a freak of nature, grotesque to the sight, more fantastic in appearance than the mind could imagine. With his quick insight, Porky read the fear in her eyes, and it only aroused him. He rubbed himself intimately, unaware of the motion. Terry saw it and turned her face away, paralyzed by the thought that he acted more like an animal than the huge dogs he kept in his bedroom. "Say, Porky," Teddy said in his most persuading voice, "I ain't got but $10, man. You think you can toss in a little gapper for me and Terry?" Terry glared at him angrily. She hadn't asked for any dope, and she didn't want Porky giving her any. Instantly, she realized that this was the real reason Teddy had asked her to come up with him. It was not because he really wanted her company. He only tolerated her with him because he knew Porky liked her, and he was taking advantage of that fact. She could feel herself blushing as the anger welled up inside her. She tried not to let it show as she glared at Teddy, but from the smile on Porky's face, she believed he knew just how she felt. Amused, Porky stared at Teddy. He realized that Terry was the reason why Teddy asked for more dope than he would ordinarily have done. It would be a cold day in hell when one of these dope fiends started to outthink him, Porky thought coldly. "You know I'm going to look out for my little girl, Terry," Porky replied easily. He grinned when he noticed her flinch. Yes, he would give her all the dope she wanted, and then some. The way he had it reasoned out, he didn't believe it would take long to get her strung out, not if she continued to snort the extra good dope he put her way, and he was definitely going to see that she snorted most of the dope he gave them.